Okay, today is Thursday, the 27th of January in the year of our Lord 2022. What I've got tucked under my arm is a replacement scope, larger model than the one I used last night to image M42 in Orion. It was Wednesday night. The sky's pretty clear. Orion has yet to culminate. You'll notice that there are probably 2 or 3 stars on the screen that aren't shifting. The ones that are not shifting are artifacts based on this setting. About every second or so, the stars that move towards the upper right on the screen are actual stars the imager is detecting. The fixed ones are artifacts. You can see I've already removed the ST80 from the mount. Here what you see before you is the optical tube assembly of the 4-inch achromatic refractor. And here's a dew shield, and it also helps protect from stray light going through the objective lens, which is located right here. When I removed the short tube 80, I also separated the finder scope, the 6x30 erect image finder scope, from the ST80 because it mounts conveniently into a dovetail attachment here. As I grabbed a flange left over from assembling the observatory. I'm not sure you're going to get a good view, but what the heck. Let's mount this baby up. Having removed the lens caps from the finder scope and the main objective, I'm now getting photons being collected by the lens right about here, the 4-inch objective, and it's kind of like taking a long conical path until ideally they come to focus right at the CCD imager. Now this finder scope has yet to be collimated along with the main telescope. But what I'm going to do now is just set it on something there, which will then allow me to apply power from this external battery and turn on the Revolution CCD monitor screen. As you can see, after going to outdoor mode for sensitivity, I now have an image. That image was sharpened up by moving the focuser and the visual back, as you can see, in and out. The interesting thing about this is it's a much longer focal ratio telescope than the f5. This is an f10. And what it means is the image is larger through this telescope and it's easier to accomplish good focal precision because the cone of light that comes down from the objective has greater depth to it. So what I've done now is I have now got an image. So the idea for me to do now is, since I do a lot of observing to the south, is to rotate the sensor in such a way that we get a terrestrial view. See, as I rotate this, we get a terrestrial view of that tree, which is right there, as you can see. So now the tree is upright. Having achieved focus, notice now that there's a bit of a strain on the cabling for the unit. On the SD80, it was optimal to route it around this front leg, but now I'm going to have to disconnect it and route it this way because most of my observing, all of the observing for the observatory is going to be along this axis right here, swinging from the east to the deep south. Having turned off power from the battery to the imaging resolution imager and returned the lens cap to the main objective as well as to the finder scope, here and there. I've reoriented the scope upwards, so now the roof tries can be closed on the observatory. Friday the 28th, a little bit before 7 o'clock. And switching on. You can see some light now from the display. Okay, now I just screw around with the settings a little bit today. I'm not seeing anything here that I like. I did get a pretty decent view of the hillside, so I'm probably going to have to play with this again. But I would point out it took about 3 minutes for me to get to the point where the telescope is now exposed to the night sky through the observatory. And of course, once again, my friendly neighborhood lighting sources. What you're looking at now is a view of Sirius, brightest star in the night sky. And you can see another fainter star off to the right. This is based on the settings that I established this afternoon. There's an awful lot of white noise in the setting. You can see it flashing all over the screen. And Sirius being a magnitude -1 something star, it is not as massive as it might appear in terms of its fingerprint on the screen, as we've seen the other night. So this particular set of set points is perhaps a little better on stars than some of the early settings we tried on the resolution imager. The current settings are this. It's custom. A couple of things are turned off. Motion detect is on. That allows it to stabilize the image display. Alright, the real key is to go into the custom setting. And I got to do that by navigation. And take a look at what it's... Oops, it's actually changing it. I don't do that yet. Go back to custom. Gotta navigate here, pushing buttons. No, that's not it. Go into custom. Alright. Now, right now, in custom, the shutter is set on auto. Because a white balance is white, ATW, whatever that means. Day and night's on auto. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate by pushing the buttons on the CCD box. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's go back. Alright, let's shift this to fix. Alright, now that's a decent star background right there. But notice how Sirius got a lot brighter. At least there's not so much noise now. Alright, so I'm going to advance it a little bit. Alright, now there's a thing called white balance. I could mess around with that. I don't know that that's going to have any effect. Let's try some of these other. This is manual. Now you can see that Jupiter has become a tiny star. Look at that. You can see it bouncing around back behind the auto. Alright, that's very, very faint. Now there's probably some settings associated with the shutter speed. Oh, this is interesting. I hadn't played with these before. Alright, let's see if we can get Sirius, the shutter speed, set it up to a point where I might expect it to look. If you see that, now it looks more like a star on the screen. Now I have no idea how it's going to appear when we go to the Great Nebula of Orion. But, you know, that's kind of a semi-acceptable vision. At about 100x, by the way. I was experimenting with it today. Let's go and see what this decimal setting does. Alright, so what happens when I push some buttons here? Oops, wrong button. The buttons are not easily accessible. Okay, let's try another button here. Oh, that's just navigating. Alright, that's 12. Now you can see that Sirius is getting much brighter now. Now I don't really want ginormous stars like this on the screen. But that's just the way it is. Because we want to be able to see the nebula. I'm going to try to put this at a setting that seems to be acceptable. Now I pushed the wrong button again. It's so difficult to navigate with this thing. Alright, now you're starting to see lots of pixelation. I'm going to leave it about decibel 24. AGC max, whatever that parameter is. Let's leave it at that for the time being. The background's pretty decent. I'm not seeing any fake stars, artifacts. I'm not seeing many other stars either. There is a little one right about there. Let's set this setting and let's lock it down the way it is. And see if I can navigate to return. Press the button. Alright. Shutter is on manual. Now the white balance, not going to play with that right now. day, night, set in auto. What if I go back here and set it on night? Let's see what effect that has. No, it didn't seem to have much of an effect, but I do like the way the background sky looks. Although I'm not seeing those stars there before, so and it's got that sprinkly salt appearance around the star. Let's shift it back to auto. Give it a day, auto. All right, so now I'm going to go to return. All right, let's see what other settings we might have here. Picture adjust, I don't think that's a factor. E-zoom off, DIS. I have no idea what this does. Let's turn it on. It seems to have stabilized the image location a little bit when I did that. Motion detect's already on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out and save on this, and we're going to go and have a look at the great nebula and see if we can get any kind of decent view. Save it. Alright, there we go. That was a long session, 5 minutes or so of playing with that thing. Okay, it's still Wednesday night, it's about an hour and a half later. Orion has yet to culminate. I've been playing with the settings under the most unpleasant temperature conditions possible. Bare-fingered. Oh well, sacrifices. Now you can see M42 progressing across the screen. It's highly pixelated. In fact, it looks brighter in the camera than it does on the screen from this point of view, but viewing angle is very important. Now, earlier I had settings where I was able to resolve all 4 stars of the trapezium. Now I've optimized the settings to be able to show the nebulosity, but it's vastly overexposing the stars and the trapezium. So, boy, it'd be sure nice if there was just a single knob you could turn to switch between the 2 modalities, so you could do double stars, well, multiple star work, or nebulosity. The funny thing about all this is the other night, under the initial settings, which I have not been able to recover, there was color and it looked like a nebula. You'll see that in the ST80, but I'm not seeing it here. Anyway, that's my best shot for this evening. I'll run you through the menuing system a little bit so you can see what the settings are. Alright, drop my gloves. Alright, I'm pressing a button on the actual viewer itself. You can see it's in custom scene select mode. Now this is really difficult to navigate because there's 4 buttons on this tiny thing and my hands are extremely cold. But if I go to that and press the button, oops, that's not the button I meant to press. You can see now when I'm in fixed shutter AGC mode, white balance is ATW. I have to look all this up later on. But basically, IR Optimizer is what actually gave me the biggest boost in terms of seeing nebulosity, even though it was highly pixelated. So there's a lot of settings here to be played with. And you got to navigate through all of them, and you got to somehow find the one that you're looking for, and then you have to find the button to be able to actually return, to actually do anything with these settings. So what I'm going to do is just step you through this, the best of my ability. There's manual mode, which I played with quite a bit. I wasn't able to get as good a result. Auto mode, which I can leave it on now if you want to see that. Oops, for some reason it wants me to do a setup in auto mode. Now I've got to go ahead and navigate to return. If I can find it, 2, 3, 4. Nope, I'm not finding a button. Alright, I did find a return button. So you can see it's a fairly complicated series of steps you got to go through. And during the day when I want to set the focus, I have to completely change the settings in order to be able to visualize terrestrial hillsides and trees and things. I was very impressed with the quality of the image on that, however. Anyway, I'm going to knock off tonight. Maybe, if it's nice again tomorrow night, I'll play some more. Well, today is Saturday the 29th of January 2022. I got a little pen light here so I can see where I'm walking. Earlier today what I did is I went through and I tried to reset everything to the point where I could start again with the imaging. Right now you're seeing random stars, and what I'm going to do is turn it on Sirius so you can see how large of a disk it would create under what I considered, what I'm assuming is kind of a reset situation in terms of the imager. Meanwhile, I realized yesterday that a lot of the pixelation that was occurring on the screen, especially with regards to M42, the Great Nebula, was probably due to the fact that I was using a Barlow lens, which basically was diluting the light source to the point where it didn't look nebular, it looked like it was pixels. So let me go ahead and turn the scope on to Sirius. Okay, what we're getting now is an image of Sirius in the lower left-hand corner. The scope is now, as I mentioned, at a lower magnification. In fact, I'm noticing there's quite a significant number of stars in the field. So this is probably a good point to begin to explore some of the set points to improve the image quality. Obviously, Sirius is quite bloated, but I'm actually kind of impressed by the more pinprick nature of the stars that are in the region of minus 1.5 magnitude Sirius. Most of those stars are probably in the 7 to 8 magnitude range and are not visible to the unaided eye. Okay, I'm going to allow the Great Nebula to drift across the screen right now. You can see it entering from the lower left. For some reason, the noise factor is less than it was earlier. And we're still seeing quite a bit of pixelation, but I'm actually seeing some nebulosity on the main screen. Of course, you're seeing it as rendered on this camera. The reason I'm using the camera is because I can also record my observations while doing the videography. So what you're seeing now is the Great Nebula in Orion, M42. It's drifting across the screen. There are hints of the dark obscuration nebula to its left, or to the east, as it drifts across the screen. This isn't too bad. I just bumped it, sorry. This isn't really too bad of an image. I would like to see something that looks more nebular. This still looks highly pixelated. What you're seeing here now is I've just finalized a bunch of settings. And one thing I'm noticing right off is the unit, regardless of setting it up custom and setting up all kinds of set points, initially overexposes the image of the moon as it enters the field, and gradually it's correcting itself. So the settings I've come up with look best to the eye. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to translate into the camera. But this, once again, is moon, probably day 8, maybe day 9. The full moon is next Wednesday. Today is actually Wednesday, so it's 7 days away. Anyway, you can see that with the focal reducer, using the 4-inch achromat with a 40-inch focal length, the moon is filling the entire screen. Now, I have basically adjusted the screen to a 4:3 ratio, which gives the moon an actual roundish spherical appearance, because if you leave it on the native display size, you get elongations. So now the moon is pretty much filling the screen, which indicates to me the magnification is probably at 1 millimeter exit pupil, which means for this scope, probably a little less than that, maybe about 120x. You can see the terminator is nicely delineated, the Maria. Right now what's happening is, one of the things I'm looking for is the disclosure of crater Plato, which is a very nice crater on the moon about 100 miles across that has some interesting features in it that are rarely observable unless you have superb seeing conditions and excellent optics. There's actually a tiny crater in there that whitens out. So here the moon is progressing across the screen, and it's moving from left to right, which is basically what you would expect. I've got the imager set up so that basically it is following the moon as it appears. So this should be the southern terminator now that's about to exit the screen. And you can see there's a prolific number of craters there, and I don't have any of them memorized. I would have to go in afterwards and look on a lunar chart, a lunographic chart, to be able to identify the craters. There's only a few handful of craters on the moon that I actually have some sense of, like Plato and Grimaldi, which is a late full moon crater. But here we see the moon exiting. You see the delineation of the crater. There's a central, that main crater there has a central mount. And as it exits the screen, we're starting to lose image quality because the sensor, even though I've got it on manual, seems to be doing some image processing on its own. So I'm going to let it drift off, and we'll be looking at other lunar images later, and with the 6-inch refractor on especially good nights, we should get some really good imagery. Carpe Noctem.